Hello everyone, this is Harry Lythall here again. In this video I will talk about RF safety, part 2. This video is divided into two parts, but here in part 2 I will discuss the safety aspects of physical contact, misconceptions and even some misinformation. In part 1 I spoke about the effects of RF on the human body, put it into perspective, and then I compared different types of transmission technologies. I've included a link to part 1 at the end of this video. I'll begin with actually RF cables. RF cables are shielded and have a typical leakage of about minus 70 decibels for a cheap cable. So any RF isolation, radiation from cables is 1/10,000,000th of the power that is inside the cable. RF cables can, however, be sensitive to RF power. For example, at 3 GHz, a 1 metre length of 1/4 inch coaxial cable can have a loss of like half a decibel. So a 6 metre length of cable can have a loss of 3 decibels, or that's 50% of the power. Now, if you feed the cable with, say, 100 watts, then the cable will dissipate half of that as heat in the first 6 metres. Now, this is not normally a problem, but many cables are bunched together, and then the lack of airflow between the cables can cause heating. Now, for fire safety reasons alone, high powers at high frequencies are conducted using thicker coaxial cables that have a lower loss per metre. Now, if you put your fingers across a 50 Hz power outlet, then you will get a current flowing through your body, and this current is not attenuated due to frequency. In other words, you will get a nasty shock. 1 milliamp of current can be regarded as a severe reprimand, but 10 milliamps is that level that can be considered fatal. But to get to this level you need to have volts, and 35 volts AC or 50 volts DC is considered to be fatal under certain conditions. If you put your fingers across an RF cable terminals with, say, 500 megahertz at 50 watts, then the current in your skin will create a magnetic field which generates an opposite current that opposes the original current. Now, don't get me wrong, it is still dangerous, but you're more likely to burn yourself instead of being electrocuted. You could be seriously killed. It also stings like hell. Now, early shortwave radio operators, for example, often spoke into microphones that had a metal-cased microphone. Now, this sort of frequency is not radiation hazard because the frequency is too low. But if the radio transmitter was not properly earthed or grounded, or if the antenna was not properly balanced, then the operator would soon find out about this. He could often burn his lips on the microphone. So the experienced operator would then go outside, inspect the antenna, the earthy or grounding rods in the ground, and try to identify the fault. Maybe even urinate or pee on them to get a better ground contact. At this point I must point out that if you play about with high RF powers, for example the magnetron in a microwave oven, then you're just asking for trouble, unless you know exactly what you are playing about at. Inexperienced dabblers have had their hands seriously disfigured or even lost fingers when playing with microwave ovens at 2.4 GHz. Although not RF, I must also point out that the DC power unit in a microwave oven generates almost 4,000 volts. Unlike RF, DC is particularly dangerous and usually lethal. The smoothing capacity in there can also store a charge for a long time after the unit is switched off. Misconceptions. I've seen social media where people wear tin-foil hats on their heads to protect their brains from eavesdropping or RF radiation. Now, this is all hysteria. It's propagated by people who are either gullible or want to provoke or mislead people with little knowledge. Even though there are millions of electrical circuits in the brain, all that you can measure is about 20 to 50 microvolts. That's a total aggregate if you place electrodes in direct contact with someone's head, and this is an aggregation of millions of signals, much like a football crowd wave when they're all standing up and waving in sync. Now, you and everybody else, you organise your brain differently during early development. So there's no way you can interpret anybody's thoughts, even if you could isolate any individual pulses or signals. So this means that there's no way your thoughts can be monitored, no matter what sort of antennas are pointed at your head. Normal radio frequency exposure cannot control or disturb your thoughts, or even affect you with the coronavirus. A strobe lamp flashing at your face at 17 Hz could provoke an epileptic reaction, but there is no published information of RF signals doing this. Rumours, the good one here. Not all rumours are malicious, by the way. In the UK Royal Air Force in the 1960s, I worked on Airfield Instrument Landing Systems, that's ILS. Now, ILS transmits 4 radio beams, 2 vertically stacked and physically positioned to give the aircraft pilots the 3-degree glide path information. The left-right localizer beams were in the VHF spectrum and were 2 horizontal dipoles side by side, located either side of the focal point of a 20-metre wide chicken wire fence, forming a parabolic reflector. And the pilot, he would steer down between the 4 beams, watching the vertical and horizontal needles on a meter. Okay? Now, as long as the pointers cross in the centre of the meter, then everything is okay, everything is all hunky-dory. The area in front of the localizer beam, however, is sensitive to obstructions, and it occasionally happened that a driver would see a nice, vague and grassy, well-clipped area and park his Land Rover in front of the antennas. Now, this was bad news for a pilot trying to land a fighter aircraft in poor visibility when the runway was not where he expected it to be as he passed over the inner marker. Now, around World War II, some bright spark of an ILS engineer spread the rumour that RF would make men sterile. And suddenly all the parking in front of the antennas stopped. So this was a good rumour. Today, though, I still hear the rumour that RF makes men sterile. No, it does not. And also I'm going to conclude with a bit of social media. And I've read reports of people reacting violently to destroy street lamps in the belief that there's a 5G antenna hidden in them. The proof is that they've seen a dead tree in their neighbourhood, or someone's child found a dead bird in a water butt. Now, people who do not know anything can easily be led to draw the wrong conclusions. So if you've watched this video, then you will know that RF exposure in our world is absolutely not a problem. You will not glow in the dark, and exposure is not cumulative. So let's have a little recap. In this video, I talked to you about RF cable safety and power handling. I talked about the physical contact with RF and the need for RF earthing or grounding. I did mention RF misuse and misinformation. And finally, the impossibility of RF, for example, reading your thoughts. Once again, I urge you to question everything that you see or read on the internet. Visit the Doctor Who pages at the World Health Organization and read for yourself the published research. Never ever believe any of the scaremongers who try to tell you that exposure will make you sterile, nor will it burn you into a crisp. So once again, I hope that you found this video interesting. You can find the link to the part 1 in the description, and also the link to the left of the screen. Please feel free to any comments below and click on some of the buttons down there. All comments are greatly appreciated, whether they be positive or constructive. The more likes I get, so the more videos I will produce. Having said that, I want to thank you all for watching, and I wish you all the very best regards from myself, Harry Lythall, with the amateur radio call sign SM0VPO, an Englishman living in Sweden.